What do you say, Jas? Shall we get this?
Let's do it. Yeah, and just so for the folks who don't know who I am the resident customer success slash support manager here at Clearscope. Just kind of guest starring in here, kind of showing you some of those quality of life improvement features later in this demo. But Bernard, take it away, man.
I shall. Yes, yes. Jas has been an amazing customer success manager. And if you haven't interacted with him, that means that we're probably doing a good job. But if you have interacted with him, I'm sure the experience has been more than pleasant. All right, so what's new with Clearscope? We have been working on a lot of different things, but perhaps the biggest thing that we have started to flesh out is this idea of content monitoring. You could imagine that lots of people ask us about this idea of rerunning a Clearscope report. And that's because the shift in SEO paradigm is becoming more about maintaining the inventory of content that you already have rather than doing more, right? Instead of 25 blog posts every month for 12 months, you end up running out of relevant, interesting things to talk about. And at the end of the day, the writers sort of get led astray, get bored, whatever. And really what you should be doing instead, and what people are doing, is paying attention to your existing content, making sure that it's staying relevant, up to date over time. So Clearscope's newest feature that we're going to be toggling for people in private beta is going to be addressing this exact concept. Other new features that you may have noticed within the application over the last week or two have been this idea of document versions. You could think of that as what Google Docs does in terms of saving copies of what is happening inside Clearscope, and Terms Map, which is a microscopic head-to-head comparison of exactly how the competitors are addressing each one of the different topics at a term level. We'll then show you some advanced walkthroughs that you may have never known that you could have done in Clearscope. So that'd be a content inventory analysis, how to focus Clearscope to tackle a diverse intent search engine results page, and then building content briefs with our new research tab, which is also a relatively new feature that entered the Clearscope feature list. Then Jas is going to take over to point out a lot of little tiny quality of life improvements that we've tidied up over the last many months. And then, well, we'll answer any questions, address any thoughts or feedback that y'all have along the way. So what's new in Clearscope? Like we've been talking about, it's all about content monitoring. And again, the reason why this, we think, is going to be the brand new standard of how to think about content moving forward is back to the idea that more is not better. What's better is to make sure that you have the pieces of content targeting the right searcher intents, and you keep that relevant over time. Clearly, different topics are going to evolve at different paces. And just as a thought experiment, you could imagine if you wrote a piece of content on the coronavirus, that maybe this week you need to be talking about the Delta variant. But 1 month ago, you might be needing to talk about vaccination rates and all that different stuff. If you weren't updating your content very aggressively for the topic of COVID, well, your content would likely not continue to perform over time. So again, we'll be enabling this for your account after the call. Well, not after the call, we'll drop the link in the calendar, and then you have to book a time to chat with us so that we can gather the feedback about how this all works. Let me just show you then content monitoring in action. You can see here that I have this enabled in beta for our account. And what you would do to get up and running is that you would add your content inventory or pages that you want tracked inside of Clearscope. You'd visit that by clicking on the Add Pages button right here, where you'll see a list of queries and the list of content URLs that you want monitored. As an example, I have this as the workflow, right? You all likely have some form of list of keywords in one column, list of URLs in another column, and all kinds of other metrics like domain authority, monthly search volume, whatever that you have inside of a spreadsheet. Assuming that you have this, you can then come to the add pages to monitor, put those in over here on the left, and then you would put in the associated URLs that you want monitored over here on the right. You can then add a label, just because you might want to keep track of different money pages or informational pages, or the status of who wrote those pieces of content. And then we can apply the monitor NerdWallet, since we're monitoring some NerdWallet pages, and then we hit add pages. What will happen then is Clearscope will take these monitored these URLs and then run a Clearscope report in the background, in the same way that you have been used to running Clearscope reports. So you have to wait a little while for these to start to populate, but then we'll initially score the content based on what we see currently on those pages and how they're scoring against the content grades. You'll see here then, currently on a weekly cadence, every Monday, the Clearscope report will default run in the background, and will give you then a snapshot of exactly how your inventory is scoring in terms of content relevancy over time. You'll notice here then in the list of monitored pages, you'll see what your content is currently scoring. And should you want to see some progression over time, you'll notice that some pages like HubSpot's investor pitch deck template started as a C+, but guess what? Managed to go down to an F. Or you could see here, they might have noticed that their piece of content is click-through rate dying or dead, start to lose relevance, go back and refresh it, and then make sure that their content is staying relevant over time. So that's it. You'll also see these little indicators that signal that, hey, this is improving in content relevance from the last couple of snapshots that we've seen, or this is decreasing in relevance, which would indicate again that new pieces of content are ranking on Google for this particular keyword or intent, and they're talking about different terms, different entities that are interesting. Generating leads on LinkedIn has likely evolved slightly, and people might be talking about some new tool that entered the ecosystem, or maybe the fact that generating leads on LinkedIn as a concept is becoming more saturated. So you probably have to put a little bit more effort into your outreach. Again, this is now dropping in private beta, and we want you to give us your thoughts and your feedback on this. So Jas, I believe, just put a link in the chat where you can book a time to get this enabled for your account. You'll either be talking with me or Jas, and the whole purpose is to really understand and flesh out this as an idea and concept specifically tailored to your own needs. Just as an idea, you could imagine that you probably want to be notified via email when your content grade does slip. And we are aware that that's something that people are going to want, but we also want to make sure that in that email, we figure out exactly what we're telling you, Maybe your content grade slipped from an A+ to an A-, but more importantly, you wanted to know what were the terms that have entered the entity language for that particular topic, and you want that in your email, or maybe it's something else. So we're aware of all of this. That's why we want to have individual one-on-one conversations with you. We'll toggle it for your account, walk you through how it all works, and then you let us know how we can make it better for you. All right, well, that's Clearscope's page content monitoring. Next thing that we recently dropped is going to be document versions. So let me show you how that works fairly quickly. You'll see here how to build a content brief, inside the Clearscope text editor experience. You'll have this drop down next to the more called a version history. In version history, you can save a named version of the specific snapshot of what the text inside the editor states. So I might say, okay, you know, Bernard, and this is like common naming taxonomy. I might say, okay, it's 2021, 08, 26, right? Bernard, outline V1, like that. When I save then a document version, you'll notice that I can go back to that existing version and see a snapshot of how that was at the time that Bernard saved it. Now, of course, I can start writing this piece of content and all that stuff. And then supposing that I get to another state where I finalize the outline, something like that, I could save another version that's 2021. We'll say 08, 26, you know, Bernard, final outline. So again, there's lots of use cases for why this document versioning thing is useful. You just want to keep tabs, keep track of what different states of your content may have looked like, some additional ideas and thoughts about this, right? What somebody might do is that they might have a client that they're working with, and they'll say, okay, well, the client, when they first started working with us, had this piece of content that simply looked like this. And so what a lot of people will do with document versions is that they'll go, okay, right, we'll create the snapshot of this, which is like, you know, 2021, 08, 26, client published. And then they'll improve or optimize the piece of content, scoring much better, A++, and then say, okay, this is the final version. So that gives you and the client a way to compare where the content started and why specifically they should be very happy going with you. Because sometimes, right, optimizing content makes the content just shift very slightly, but you can get or drive home an F to an A+ with just very minor changes. So having this ability to toggle back between the two different states is a very compelling way to demonstrate your value, whether that's as an agency, a freelancer, or an in-house content manager or SEO. So that'd be document versions and how that works. Last very new feature that we've released is going to be terms map. What terms map allows you to do is to get a granular analysis of exactly how the top ranking results have addressed this particular subject matter. You'll notice that there is a little link out right here to map, which you can click, and map will take you to the terms map in your Clearscope report. The indication of these green boxes would say that everybody that's talking about how to build a content brief has in fact included content brief. Should you want to see specifically how rank number 1 has described the particular concept, you can click on that to get a granular analysis of every mention of content brief within that particular result. So again, this is very helpful if you really specifically want to do a head-to-head comparison against a top-ranking competitor that you really want to crush. Or the opposite thing is kind of interesting as well, right? You'll notice that if there's a wide range of empty boxes, as indicated by the gray box, across a particular concept like quality content, that would indicate that most people are not addressing that particular concept within their piece of content. And maybe that means that you should put a little bit more love, a little bit more emphasis onto that particular concept within your piece. Other things that could be very interesting in this view is going to be this idea that, okay, maybe a particular piece of content is really just doing a very poor job answering this particular topic from the entity or term list that you see on the left. What that would signal is, in my opinion, either one of two different things. Number one, the easiest thing to lean on would be the idea that the website is very authoritative and has a lot of backlinks. And that is allowing the website to perform better than it should, given that the overall quality of the recommendations is rather poor. The other explanation, in my opinion, is just as interesting, if not more interesting. And it's this idea that perhaps that piece of content is answering a different intent or angle than everybody else. What that means is that you should probably go and take a look at what that piece of content is doing and trying to understand whether it is a intent servicing a more relevant or interesting intent that the user could care about, or if it's just simply a domain authority sort of thing, and that's allowing the piece of content to perform a lot better. So that's how I would recommend taking a look at terms map. It's a great way when you're first getting started with the piece of content to orient yourself, your writers, on seeing, okay, you know, what are people talking about? What are the holes in the top ranking results? And building out a more robust outline or brief that you can hand to your writer to then get a higher ranking, better performing piece of content. And that's how I'd recommend using terms map. Now, I want to walk y'all through a few advanced ways to consider using Clearscope, because these are little minor improvements that we've made to the product, but we didn't want to just force feed everybody this workflow style stuff. So you'll see tidbits of little settings and exports here and there that we've built into the platform to allow for these more advanced use cases. And I want to demonstrate how it all fits together in a walkthrough. A content inventory analysis is becoming a best practice, a standard, in terms of if you're getting started with analyzing a client's blog, or if you're getting started as an in-house SEO manager, you want to know, right, what you're dealing with, what you're working with. So if you have a large inventory of content you want to analyze, which is predominantly anybody who has walked into a website, right, not getting one started from scratch. The way that I would recommend tackling a content inventory analysis looks like this. So you'll see here, right, in your account, you can go to account settings. Account settings will give you a lot of different little toggles and things that you can consider leveraging within your Clearscope account. What we want to do here is automatically share reports. As I'm sure a lot of you are familiar, a shared report allows you to link it out to anybody in guest mode, therefore using that as the way to assign assignments to either in-house or freelance writers. So we toggle this, which means that when creating new reports, all of them will be default shared. So you don't have to go through and enable shared on all of your reports. So we'd save that there. And the next thing that we would do then is that we would create a spreadsheet of target keywords and their associated URLs. You could pull these from Google Search Console, from SEMrush, Ahrefs, right? Lots of tools allow you to do this, to map target keywords to the associated URLs. And then what we would do is we would take all of the keywords and do a batch report. Over here on the left, you've seen the batch interface and monitoring, same idea. And take then the batch reports, put them over here on the left, and then we take the associated URLs that we want to optimize the page on over there on the right, and then add a label if you would like, and you just run the Clearscope reports. When these are all finished, you'll see in the reports view that all of your reports will come back with content already inside the editor that's graded. You can see here, we can then sort by graded over here in the top left, which will give us a list of all of the Clearscope reports that have a associated grade with them, and you can export these to CSV. The report export gets you all of the, or at least the last 500 Clearscope reports that you've generated within your account. And then you can see here in Excel that this is how the export would look. You have then a list of the target queries, what languages and countries they were created in, who created them, what the labels are, but more importantly, your associated content grade and the suggested and typical content grades. You can imagine then it's very easy to just sort from A to Z to get a prioritized list of where your content looks weak, right? And everything that's Fs, C pluses, B minuses, you can quickly get a snapshot of how your content in terms of topical relevancy is stacking up, and then go back through and prioritize the crappier or poorer pieces of content. So that's how I would recommend doing a content inventory analysis, right? Toggle automatically to shared, then batch report create, then report export CSV. Then you have a list of your poorest quality pieces of content, and then you can go back through, prioritize those. And the reason then why the reports have been toggled to shared is because this export also comes with the list of the URLs, right? You have your overall overview URL, you have your optimized URL as well. So what a lot of people will do as the final step is that they'll take this optimized URL, you can imagine, stick it into some sort of a content management process workflow thing. And you can see here, right, add one more column that says, okay, this is where the Clearscope report belongs. Now I want you to work off of this report. And since it's been automatically shared, you don't have to go through toggle each one of those to be shared. So that's how that workflow all gets packaged together. Next one, tackling a diverse SERP intent. So if you've been a part of a lot of the onboarding calls or presentations that I typically put together, you could probably walk away knowing that Bernard's all about targeting the right intent, right? You've got to target the right intent, or else your content's going to have a lot harder time performing because it's doing less of a good job meeting the needs of the searcher. You can imagine then there are certain types of queries like email marketing software or local searches, right? Like plumbers in Austin, where you're seeing this split intent SERP starting to form. That's to say that, right, for plumbers in Austin, that I'd see directory websites like Yelp, Home Advisor, Thumbtack showing up, and then I would see local businesses that are plumbers who service Austin, and their websites show up as well. There's no way that I can actually strip off the comparison intent from that particular SERP by refining the search, right? Which is usually what I would try to do. Is there a better query than plumbers in Austin that are actually in Austin? Don't give me best comparison directory websites, except Google will always give me best top comparison websites. Okay, if that's the case and you're noticing that, right? And therefore your Clearscope report for the topic or the keyword that you're writing about comes back with a lot of noise, then what I would recommend doing is that you go to your account, your settings, and you can see here that we have advanced. Advanced then gives you the ability to block domains. And you can imagine blocking domains allows you to select specific domains that are ranking for the particular query that you want to target and blacklist them. When doing that, Clearscope is not going to take those into consideration when generating your report. So then I can go back to, and we'll stick with this email marketing software example, email marketing software. And when I generate the report, then Clearscope's going to see Capterra or G2 or PC Mag. And it's going to say, okay, well, Bernard has blacklisted this domain. So I'm just going to skip over analyzing that particular result. What that allows you to do then is to get a much more focused Clearscope report that hones in on exactly the right comparisons that you would want to be making. So again, if I were MailChimp, I would want to compare my MailChimp use case page to the Constant Contact use case page or the Marketo use case page. And that would be a fair comparison, not comparing my MailChimp use case page to the PC Mag best email marketing software. Comparison intent. So if you have a diverse intent, first thing that I would recommend is to see if you can choose a query that isolates the intent that you want to service. In some cases, like we just brought up, like software category stuff like email marketing, and also like localized queries like plumbing in Austin, there's no way to isolate just the use case or local business or that particular intent. So the way to get then a more focused Clearscope report is to just simply blacklist the domains that are irrelevant inside the domain blacklisting service over here like this. All right, so you have that domain blocking right there. One last walkthrough, and then I guess I'll take a look at chat, open it up for questions and thoughts. It's going to be building content briefs with the research tab. So as you all may have noticed that there's been a new research tab that we've loaded into the right-hand bar of the content editor, right? You'll see that over here next to the terms right here. Now the research tab has been carefully designed to give content writers, content managers, SEO folks a very high level snapshot of how to build a content outline or brief very quickly, but do it in a non-prescriptive, non-plagiaristic way. So I do want to walk you through exactly how I would approach using the research tab to accomplish this idea of building a content outline fairly quickly, but bringing your own subject matter expertise and thoughts to the table so that your content actually has a bit of soul. At Clearscope, we're always trying to toe the line of giving writers, equipping content creators with just enough tooling and just enough prescription to have them accomplish what they need, but without caging them in, right? And we pride ourselves at Clearscope on towing this balance of being prescriptive, but not overly prescriptive. So let me quickly walk you through how I'd use the research tab to quickly build a content brief. First place I would look is actually in the top competitors. What we want to do in the top competitors is to orient the writers on what are good looking pieces of content, right? You can imagine in a content brief, sometimes you provide writers with ideas or pieces of content that they should read, right? Please read over these pieces of content to orient yourself on the topic, right? We would take a look at maybe what's ranking #1, which you see agency analytics doing, say, okay, read that. Or we might take a look at, okay, a piece of content that's scoring fairly well in terms of content grade. And we might say, okay, yeah, you should probably also take a look at that. So again, we offer then the competitor snapshot as a head-to-head comparison to say, okay, right, agency analytics only needed 1,800, 1,900 words to do it. So maybe you should check that out. And also, you know, whatever this website is, it seems to be scoring well. So maybe you should read over those. Next place that I would look is going to be themes. What Clearscope's looking at is the top 100 search results for how to build a content brief. Looking at title tags, looking at meta description, related searches. People also ask, I think a lot of people don't understand how powerful this particular section is. And then we boil them down to very high level concepts that are worth expanding upon. So you can imagine, right, if I click on template, you'll see here that Clearscope's going to say, okay, right, this SEMrush, right, they used free template right there, H1. You can see then kind of this competitive outline situation where you see a lot of top ranking results and how they're using template within their piece. That's then very clear to me that if I want to write a piece of content on how to create a good brief for better content marketing, I didn't write this title, how to build an effective content brief to arm your writers, right? We'd say plus free templates, right? Something like that. Maybe not so obnoxiously so, but right, like maybe like 10 templates included, something like this. It's like, okay, right? Templates makes a lot of sense. And we should probably talk about it like that. I'd go through each one, right? Kind of take a look at creative brief, how to write an awesome creative brief, why you need a creative brief templates. Oh, when working with agencies, that's kind of interesting. Difference between a creative brief versus a content brief. It's like, I didn't know that they were different. But, right, we could jot it down, creative brief versus content brief, right? It's like, okay, that's a relevant term as well. So again, you can use these to expand upon, and they're not just like, okay, copy exactly this. They're meant to instill some thoughtfulness within your writing to say, okay, consider this within your piece of content and, write it how you want to write it. So that's how we'd recommend using themes. They're easily like, think about like heading suggestions like this. You can imagine that's how we've designed Clearscope, is that you might want some heading suggestions that are creative brief versus content brief. All right, question section. Fairly straightforward. These are pulled from Google's People Also Ask. And then we populate some more ideas from GPT-3. So the cool natural language generation technology that lots of people are raving about. We're a little less bullish, I guess, on GPT-3 to write content. We've experimented extensively with how that works. We've talked with some SEO practitioners as well that have some hesitancy around using it to spin content because they perceive that Google is probably good enough to understand that that content has been spun. So we don't want to lean too hard on GPT-3. Again, we have some ideas in the pipeline on how to actually incorporate that sort of magic inside the platform and have it be more of a, I'm feeling stuck, give me some ideas, rather than a, let me write the entire piece of content for you. So questions then, what people do with these is that you can imagine, right, you could do like this, and these are going to be like, questions to make sure you've answered within the piece. Now, the way that I like to frame this is explicitly or implicitly. So you can imagine, right, what some people will do is that what some people will do is that they'll just use these as section headers, right? You could be like, okay, well, let's start with here. What should be included in a content brief? And again, that makes sense, right, to think about within your piece. Or, right, I might say, okay, what is article brief, right? We might have a section, right, like, 1 to 2 sentences that like explain what an article brief is. And then I would say, okay, well, we've answered that implicitly within the piece of content. We don't need to just go one-to-one, turn these into section headings and say, boom, 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 cover this, cover that. Again, you're going to end up with, in my opinion, soulless SEO content. And I mean, some of it works, don't get me wrong, but I could foresee a future 1 year, 2 years from now where it's not going to work nearly as well, because again, right, Google's getting good and content is exploding. So you really got to focus on, why your content is more relevant and better serving the user than just kind of saying, okay, let me try to hit every single point as much as possible. So again, that's how we'd recommend using these sections. You'll see this little G icon pop up on the right. The reason why this exists is because, right, we want you to take a look at the SERPs. Taking a look at the SERPs is always a great idea to understand, okay, what specifically are people talking about? And that's the best way, in our opinion, to do and conduct content research. Next section, top competitors. We've already talked about why this section exists. Gives you some ammunition to orient your writers on great pieces of content. And then you might see some edge cases, right, at a higher level. Let's say, oh, this one's a C+, and it doesn't use that many words. What's happening there? And again, what's happening there is either that the website has a strong domain authority, or that the website's covering a special intent. And those are oftentimes really good things to check out and consider when you're building your content briefs. Common citations is going to be then external links or sources that people are linking out to. Right, you can imagine what these do is that they boost your expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. And they do that because you're backing up some of the claims that you might be making within your piece of content. So you could imagine, right, Content Marketing Institute, you have this like Peng, the content brief example. And go take a look at that, right? And you see, there you go, right? That's an example of a content brief from Content Marketing Institute. So instead of this manual process of going around, clicking on like different results and performing all those searches. We've aggregated the most meaningful links right here, and we might say, okay, well, consider linking out to these resources. And you like this as an example from CMI, Content Marketing Institute, right over there. It's like, okay, keyword difficulty checker. That is probably something that you would want to consider when you're building a content brief. That probably also belongs to the section on, how does SEO play a role in effective content, right? And then within that, be like Moz, KD, checker right here, link that out. So you can see here that this research tab has been designed to make your job, your life way easier in terms of building content briefs. We'll also then externally link out to additional resources that some writers like to check out. This is specifically Quora, Wikipedia, and Reddit. The reason why we just don't suck these into Clearscope is because a lot of the time you're going to see a lot of noise associated with those particular suggestions. We also feel that it's best that you actually come here and read over the topic, again, to orient yourself and to actually bring your own thoughts and opinions to the table. So we'll just link out to them. Again, you can say, oh, okay, well, this one's how should I start being a content writer? That's interesting. How to build a content brief. Okay, I don't think that those two subjects really make sense to conflate with each other. So I'm not going to include that within my outline. So that's the walkthrough of how I'd recommend building content briefs with Clearscope's research tab. It's very simple, right? Go through the different steps, look at the themes, see how people are covering it, look at the questions, include them in, and you have all of the different sections then within your content brief. All right, I'm gonna pause briefly here before passing the stage over to Jess. Any questions, thoughts, comments about anything that we've talked about? I guess Jess has just been crushing it, right?
Yeah, I've been answering them when I can.
Excellent, excellent. Can you show the steps for domain blocking? Okay, I mean, to briefly recap that, you just go to your account settings right here. It's under advanced. You'll see domain blocking right here. And then you enter in the domains that are irrelevant to, your piece of content, the steps to the brief. So for the sake of time, we'll send this out to all Clearscope users at the end of, tomorrow in our recap email. So you'll definitely have this to take a look at. All righty. Well, stage is all yours, Jess, to talk about.
All righty then. So I'm going to take you guys through kind of the quality of life improvements, little smaller things that we've done here and there just to make your lives a little bit easier. And well, these actually quality of life improvements have come from feedback from Clearscope users like you. So if you ever have an idea or thought, feel free to send it over to support@clearscope.io about how we can improve our product, and we'll definitely take it into consideration because almost all of these quality of life improvements came from Clearscope users, again, just like you. So then one of the first things we talked about is the adding additional custom terms in. So this is pretty useful in the case where basically if you have some custom brand guidelines you want to add to your piece of report to make sure that your writers are talking about them. You can add them in batches of 10 over here, as you can see. And to access this little particular add customs term field, you click this little plus button right next to the little filter in the report itself. Again, we also, underneath this as well, we do also have suggestions as well too, and that these are particularly terms that didn't quite meet our threshold for a highly important term. But if you just need some additional ideas for your piece of content, you can come here, get some more ideas, and add it as custom terms as well too. Just a real quick note though, custom terms do not affect the Clearscope content grid at all, because again, they're custom terms, right? So, all right, on the flip side of that though, we actually can delete irrelevant terms as well too. And that basically, if you see a particular term over there going like, oh, wait a second, that's not great. I don't really want to include this in my piece of content at all. Or maybe it's a competitor name that you don't want to talk about in your particular piece. You can come click on a term itself, and then a little trash can icon is next to the term where you can basically delete that term from that report then, if you never want to mention it at all. It isn't at this is report specific. If you wanted to go kind of the full, like if you never wanted to exclude this term from all future reports, we do also have this terms filter as well too, kind of right next to that domain blocking feature, which I'll go show you a little bit later in this walkthrough itself as well too. Now then, The next thing within the Clearscope optimized experience as well too is that we also have a copy mode as well too. Well, basically, if you need to copy content from your Clearscope report into another CMS for publishing, then, well, basically you can simply turn on this copy mode over here, and it turns off all highlighting and markups then, so you can easily copy and paste it into another CMS for publishing without any of that stuff and having to undo any of that. In addition to that, though, if you ever had any questions as to what Clearscope was actually scraping for the content of a particular URL, you can simply come to this more dropdown within your report, go to extract from URL, little box will pop up asking for a link to our URL, and then you hit extract from URL. And what happens is Clearscope will then scrape the content that we can off of that URL, of course, trying our best again to throw out noise elements such as sidebars, nav bars, and footers and all that stuff, and kind of so you can easily copy and paste it then into a Clearscope report then for analysis to maybe refresh or optimize further than for SEO. We also have this full width as well too, if you want to take the full width of the text editing experience as well too. Just toggle it on and off, totally up to you. All right, the next thing we got is report history. And so in the report history, as Bernard was kind of showing a little earlier, we do also have those custom labels, right? So to kind of access that interface, you simply click onto a report itself as well too. And this top bar will change to labels, archive, unarchive, and delete. This is to kind of help keep things a little bit organized in your reports itself as well, just so you can know what's going on where. And these labels are custom. You can add them to match whatever workflows make sense for you. So basically, again, archive and unarchive or delete reports as well here too. Typically would recommend that when you do want to remove reports from your your main reports view over here, you probably would want to archive those reports just in case you want to ever reference them again. You can delete them, but just so you know though, deleting a report does not refund you a report credit, because again, the report credit has already been expended by us doing their analysis of the top 30 search results out there. Okay. Next little quality of life feature we have is account settings, right? Bernard's been kind of going over this a little briefly by going through his advanced workflows above. And from the account settings, basically, from the settings page itself, you can actually change your organization's display name if you ever decide to rebrand yourself and you want to still remain using the same Clearscope report. We do also have the ability to change your organization's URL as well too, in case you need to make that additional change. And we will redirect from the old URLs to the new URLs you designate. But just so you know that we can only do one redirect at a time then. So if you did website A to website B, we'll redirect from website A's URLs to website B. However, if you did website or URL A, URL B to URL C, we will only do URL B to URL C then. Only one redirect is available at a time. Now, as for the report settings underneath here, Bernard has been kind of showing a little bit earlier as they automatically share reports over here, as Bernard was mentioning. When you toggle this on, all reports you create from then on point will be automatically shared. This is currently default toggled off for all Clearscope accounts, but if you wanted to make sure all your reports are being shared again, just toggle this on. As for the show heading presence badge setting underneath that, that is actually default toggled on for all Clearscope accounts. So if you feel like maybe those little blue dots next to the term are maybe a little bit too noisy for your writers, you can turn this off by simply clicking on this little unchecking that checkbox over here. And then the last one over here is actually this count term usage. And this is actually pretty useful if you kind of want to keep a gauge as to how many times you used a particular term in your own piece of content within a Clearscope report using our Google Docs add-on or our WordPress plugin. And basically where these last two settings show up is on this next page over here, is that when you turn on count terms usage, you'll see a little parentheses next to the typical usage range over here, indicating basically how many times you used it in your own piece of content. If you toggled off that headings presence thing over here, this little blue dot will disappear as well too. Alrighty then. Next thing is managing users. Well, we have a lot of folks who have a lot of large teams, right? So you can actually manage users and invite users to your particular Clearscope account then to kind of use it. And we do have 3 different roles you can assign to those particular users and to what match, again, your entire team composition is. So first role is members. Really simple. Basically, this is somebody who can actually just log into your Clearscope account and just run the reports and then access the reports tab. That's it. As for the managers, though, they have a little bit more information they can access, and that they can access all these settings except for billing. So they'll be able to see users, they'll be able to see usage, advanced, but they won't be able to see the billings and credits then. And basically, the admin has basically full rights to everything out there then, including billing. So folks who are dealing with kind of the financial aspect of the Clearscope side will be the admins, and they'll be the ones going into billings and credits to kind of help with that process or workflow on your end. Now then, billings and credits here. Coming to this particular experience within Clearscope itself, basically, just so you guys all know, we do talk about this a lot in our demos as well too, that you can always self-serve, upgrade, and downgrade your own plans based on your own content needs by simply clicking on this view plan options over here from your billings and credits page. It'll take you to a list of our standard plan tiers where you can kind of pick the plan that makes sense for you. So maybe next month you do know in your content calendar or your content workflows, you are creating more report, you'll be creating more content and you need more reports than for Clearscope analysis. Then you can simply upgrade up. And when you upgrade, we'll charge you the difference between your current plan and you'll get immediate access then to the additional reports then. But you can also downgrade later as well too if you just want to maintain access but don't need quite those many reports. Now, we also have the ability too is that maybe you do need a few more reports per month, but not quite enough to warrant a full upgrade, right? And so from that, you can actually purchase report credit packs. Also from the billings and credits page, and again, only admins can do this as well too. And that basically you go here, purchase report credits, and basically it'll take you to a screen where you can basically purchase report credit packs then just to kind of purchase some reports you might need additionally for this month, but not enough again to warrant that full upgrade. They'll be priced at the unit cost of the plan tier you're on. So for example, then if you're on the essentials tier plan, each additional report would cost $8.50 per report. And report credit packs do start at intervals at 10, going up by 5 then. All right, and it'll be billed to the payment method we do have on file for you. All righty, so the next then feature over here from also so within the billings and credits as well is that, okay, so maybe on your financial side, you need some extra info on those invoices then that you need to actually include just kind of for processing on your end or for documentation purposes. If you want to make sure that there's some information that you want to include on each and every invoice we issue out to you, you can come to your billing info over here, scroll down to the very bottom, hit extra info in this little space over here. Any information you put into this extra info field will show up on all future invoices issued by Clearscope in case you need to have this somewhere. This is actually pretty useful kind of like, or for European clients out there who maybe need a VAT code or some address or something of the sort that you make sure need to guarantee needs to be on your invoice then. Additionally, you can also edit your payment method as well too, and that maybe if something you want to change your payment method over here, like in terms of your credit card, you can simply click on that edit payment method. A little prompt will appear where you can change your credit card information from there. And then the last section of this particular billings and credit section is the invoice history over here, where basically if you do need to access any invoices or receipts we've ever sent you, you can come to your invoice history here, click on the show more button. It'll expand out all the invoices we ever issued out to you. You can click on view and it'll take you to a page where you can download the invoice and or the receipt then that you might need for your financial folks out there then. And finally, of course, a lot of folks do still send us support requests about canceling your subscription. Just so you guys know, you can cancel your own subscription on your own just by simply going to the very, very bottom of your billings and credits page here and hit cancel subscription. When you do hit cancel subscription now, you'll no longer be billed for the following billing period and you'll lose access to your Clearscope account and the reports within at the end of your current billing period. But again, you also have no hard feelings from us because, well, if you're using Clearscope, we want to make sure you're having a good time using Clearscope. All right. Moving forward, then we also have a report usage field in case you kind of need to monitor your own usage. Then from here, you basically it's from your account settings as well too. You simply go to the usage page and we drop down over here, and basically we'll just kind of show you kind of a graph as to how many reports you're running per day for that particular month, and we kind of go back about a month or a week. Oh, about a week, my mistake. And basically, you can also then see if you scroll down further on this page, kind of which users on your account are also running these reports as well too, just to kind of get an idea as to who's in your accounts and who's leveraging their Clearscope the most. All right. Now then, this is kind of the advanced settings that Bernard was kind of touching upon a little bit earlier. And Bernard touched upon pretty in depth about the domain blocking then for kind of that advanced workflow to kind of exclude reference or websites then from a Clearscope analysis. But this is also what that terms filter one is as well too, where if you add a particular term here, it'll be excluded from all future Clearscope reports out there. Again, we'd always caution you to use these particular advanced filters or advanced feature settings cautiously, because, well, if you do this, it'll exclude from all future Clearscope reports as well too. And sometimes some of that stuff that you exclude might actually be relevant to kind of Google for your SEO purposes. All right, I think I went through everything fairly quickly, but at this point in time, I'm going to pass it back to Bernard now for thoughts and feedback as well too, about as to if you have any questions about anything I showed you, or if I need to go back and kind of show you again some other stuff. All righty, Bernard, take it back.
We have planned for y'all for this call. Any additional thoughts, comments, feedback on Clearscope, on what we talked about? Really, the stage is for you in these like last 5 minutes or so. I can speak to, I guess, some of the ideas that we have in store for everybody outside of just kind of working through this idea of content monitoring and what people want to see within the content monitoring feature. We are definitely extensively looking at the natural language generation field. I would say that over the last 6 months, that there has been an explosion of either using GPT-3 to write marketing copy or SEO copy. And we want to make sure, again, that we're not treading into hot water from a GPT-3 perspective, because GPT-3 actually does explicitly disallow you from generating SEO content with their technology. And we also want to make sure that we're not treading into hot water when it comes to the content that you're creating. Because ultimately, you want to create content that ranks for Google search. And what GPT-3 actually does is that it ingests millions, not billions, of documents on the internet. And it looks for highly probability-like outcomes that follow specific entity or sentence structures. So you could imagine that if you were creating a piece of content on something that was very factual, like who is the first president of the United States, that GPT-3 would have almost a 99.9999999% certainty that those words that follow should be George Washington. However, right, when it comes to more opinionated subject matter, like climate change or whatever, then GPT-3 is going to have a lot less certainty in terms of the things that should follow that particular concept. So what we're seeing happen then is that for factual content, I do think that natural language generation is actually going to kind of take that away from SEO content writers or SEO, because, well, Google's already actually answering that question with its own GPT-3-like functionality known as a featured snippet, right? If you ask Google, how many legs does a dog have? It has a high confidence that it should be 4, right? So we're seeing the need for factual content actually disappear as Google just answers that question for you. And we're actually seeing then, in our perspective, the need for thoughtful, highly opinionated subject matter expert content to start hitting the table, which is why, again, we've been staying away from this whole GPT-3 thing. It's like, yes, it might be a shortcut for the next 6 to 12 months, but you can imagine that Google's algorithm is constantly evolving. And we see a world where if you maybe GPT-3 spun some stuff now and are finding success with it, great. But Google might just change the rules of the game and you might get completely destroyed like in the future. All right, we're actually finally getting some questions. Is there an extra cost for the monitoring data? Good question. There is not. So everybody will get 50 monitoring slots. You can think of that as like a rank tracking slot. And that's all completely free. And we want you to use it and to give us your thoughts about using it. We still haven't figured out what the pricing model should be surrounding monitoring, but just know that everybody who is on the Clearscope plans that they're currently on will get monitoring without having to pay an additional cost in the future. So monitoring will be part of your Clearscope plan in the same way that reports are part of your Clearscope plan. If you are on a cheaper plan, then you could imagine you'll get less monitoring credits when we finally fully release the feature. Colton says, I'd love for Clearscope to suggest what the right target keyword should be for a given keyword. If that suggested target keyword isn't what I'd expect, there may be a signal that the content needs to be reworked. Wow, that is also another thing that we've been toying around in our minds around this idea of search intended discovery. That's to say, we haven't really found a great technical solution for arriving at exactly that idea. I think at a high level, what I've been prescribing that people should do is to think about topics in terms of perspective frameworks. So you could imagine if you wanted to write a content on how to train for a triathlon, then you probably also want to address the idea, why should someone train? And are you ready to train? And then how to train? And then maybe, like common mistakes or injuries that people suffer from while they train, right? And that's sort of just the natural progression of, right, what somebody would consider given that particular topic. That said, yes, we are obviously thinking about, from a technical perspective, how to bring this idea of search intent into Clearscope, but we'll see where that goes. All right, Nick says perspective pieces in the future. I did X, here's what happened. Yes, so that's exactly this nod towards why we think GPT-3 is useful for becoming unstuck, right? So we have this idea that it's like Google's, like I'm feeling lucky, or like they used to have that. It'll be like Clearscope's I'm feeling stuck. And then what we'll do is we'll look at what you've written, we'll look at what terms you have not used, and then you click this I'm stuck button. At least this is the current way that we're thinking about it. And then it might suggest you like 5 different sentences to unstuck you on your writer's block, that kind of thing. So that's an implementation that we're thinking about. Again, leveraging GPT-3 not to generate the content and override the writer's style and the writer's voice, but to unstuck the writer should the writer fall into writer's block. Right up on the hour. Any concluding questions, thoughts, feedback, opinions? Thank you all for joining us for this wonderful announcement. Okie dokie. Well, Jess, thanks for walking everybody through the quality of life improvements.
Oh, well, thanks for inviting me to a webinar to see the fine folks of Clearscope.
Of course, always. And so, yes, we will recap everything in an email that goes out to all Clearscope users tomorrow, right? Maybe you're the admin or you're the manager, you want your writer to see this, or your freelance guest mode person. You get a copy of the presentation, the recording, and then in that email as well, we will include the link where you can book the time to chat with us to get content monitoring private beta enabled. And yes, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being with us as Clearscope users and customers. We honor each and every one of you. Take care and stay safe out there, y'all.